Hey, how you doing? How are you navigating the Achieving Inclusion Summit? My name is Tracy Brown, just in case this happens to be the first session that you're exposed to. And throughout this multi-day summit, we have been encouraging you to be bold. Be bold. Be bold as you pay attention to three tracks. We've been talking about confronting racism. We've had some conversations around measuring progress. And we've also had some conversations related to avoiding fatigue. Avoiding fatigue for you as an individual who's committed to inclusion, but also avoiding fatigue in the organization from doing the same things over and over, or from not moving the needle forward or moving your initiatives into innovative territory. And in this session, I have been assigned, which is kind of funny, right? I've assigned myself, but I have been assigned to focus on some navigation of real life challenges. And these real life challenges are examples that have been chosen from questions that people have asked. A couple of people did email in the last 24 hours, a couple of scenarios or situations. And so I definitely have included those in the ones that I'm going to talk about. And that really was a little bit of a challenge to choose, 5, 7, knowing that our goal, is to respect your time. So I chose some from different perspectives because there, may have been 4 or 5 that were kind of similar. So I tried to make sure they represented different challenges or problems or scenarios that you may be experiencing. And if you haven't experienced them, that you want to be prepared to navigate. So I'm going to just dive in, and I'm going to pull a card and tell you what the scenario is, and then for 3 minutes or so, talk about ideas that you want to keep in mind if this were to happen to you. So the first one has come up quite a bit in the last, well, it's always been a challenge, but it's come up a lot in the last couple of years with people calling and asking me or this question, or it just coming up where I go in to work with an organization and learn that this is the situation. So here we go. What do you do when you have a DEI leader who's responsible for leading the inclusion initiative in their organization, but they have no staff and no budget? Some of you are saying, well, that's really stupid. And I agree. Why would you create a position? You wouldn't create, in most organizations, you would not create a leadership role where they had no direct responsibility for budget, and a leadership role where they have no staff to support them. But this happens quite a bit in the under the umbrella of DEI. And so what do you do if you are that person or that's happening in your organization? Now, my first gut reaction is leave. If you are expected to lead a complex initiative and you have not been provided with staff support or with financial support, then leave. That's easy for me to say. So I'm going to say more than that. So let's assume this is maybe a new position, or maybe it's a promotion for you internally. Then my first question becomes, why did you take the job? Why did you take the job when you knew there was no staff and you knew there was no budget? So if there was a compelling reason for you to take the job, I really want to be a part of the change that I see this organization needs. I have a very clear vision about how we can build a robust initiative, and I believe I will be able to demonstrate that in 2 years from now. I will have staff and budget. I mean, if there was some rationale that made you say yes to a position of responsibility without staff or money, then okay, don't leave, but do whatever that vision, that compelling yes was. Then that will set your priorities. And you don't get to complain that you don't have staff and you don't have money. So if you're in that position, what are some things that you can do? So you can uh, align yourself with who does have power and who does have money, and how can you become what I refer to as their secret weapon, where you build the kind of relationship with them that you help them achieve their goals in such a way that they become the voice of how inclusion has helped them be successful with your help and coaching, right? So you use the person that has power and authority, or you use the person who has budget, and you partner with that person who has budget. Now, I've recommended this approach to many ERGs, or, even advisory councils where they don't have their own budget, but they know every director has a budget. So if I'm the DEI leader and I don't have the budget, or I don't have the budget I need to implement what the organization says it wants, then you better believe that I'm going to coalesce 10 directors, or everyone. If I'm in a small organization, I'm going to get 5 of the 7 vice presidents, and we're going to talk about how inclusion is going to help them. And then I will go back to them and say, and each one of you has to contribute, X amount of money for us to do this. The other thing that comes to mind is that as you are advocating for staff and for budget, please be careful. Don't advocate for either of those things because, oh, I'm so overworked. I'm working so hard. Oh, woe is me. And I feel so overwhelmed. No, no, no. You come to it with data. You come to it with data about what the norms are in terms of staffing for these kinds of positions in similar size organizations. You come to it with data that is specific to your organization, related to these are the things we need to do in order to achieve our goal or move closer toward our vision. And in order to do that, it's going to take X amount of money, or we need to fund this particular project. Link your request to money and or staff with outcomes, right? Not with feel sorry for me saying yes to taking this job when I knew there was no staff and I knew there was no budget. And the one other thing that just went through my mind is that, one of the absolute best ways to turn that situation around, if you decide to stay in it, is to simply deliver amazing results. Deliver amazing results that require, or that result in people saying, we want more, we need more. And then you are able to say, yes, these are amazing results. And in order to do more, this is the budget that needs to be attached to it, and or we need 3 staff people, and here's what they would be doing. So this one does still come up a lot more. I think I am shocked that so many people say yes when they are offered a position to be the leader in the organization related to DEI. And in the course of interviewing, they find out, understand, and then accept that I will do this without the resources that are required to give you the results that you want. So, example number 2, we're talking about navigating the real life challenges that come up related to DEI. So I received this email and it says, in our organization, we have employees who are Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and boomers. And communication and collaboration is really hard. There's a lot of ignoring each other or judging each other based on the age group. Okay, let's dive in. I think this too is really real. And in general, I have found 2 things. One, that in general, people don't even know what group they are in. Now, I would say with baby boomers, by now they know because they've, been years and years, and now they're the oldest group in the workforce. And so I think boomers know, but Gen X, millennials, sometimes referred to as Gen Y, and Gen Z, often, it's the closer they are to the official dividing years, the less sure they are of which group they are a member of. Number two, what I have noticed over the recent years is that in general, most people don't really know what group the others are in. They just know they're 20 years older or 15 years younger. And so they just say, the millennials, or they just say, oh, Gen Z or Gen Y, right? They are Gen X. They don't really know what the demarcations are, but there is a pattern that I have seen of there being difficulties communicating with people who are 10 or 12 years older or 10 or 12 years younger, or a bigger spread than that. And so I love that someone's asking this question, like, what can we do to get people communicating better and to collaborate better? And I love that the observation already has been that the pattern tends to be that people judge everybody else based on what they think the age group or generational group is, or they just totally ignore them. Like, oh, oh yeah, you're in your 20s, you don't know anything. Why am I even bothering to talk to you? When that 25-year-old may be bringing some great ideas forward and things to think about, or insights that relate to your customers or that impact your recruitment strategy. So there's always that value. Or the person who's in their mid 30s who is dismissing the person who is 55 to 60, like, oh, you don't really get anything with technology, or oh, you're going to slow us down. And just making that assumption based on what they think versus the individual actual contribution, and forgetting that we can learn from each other. So there's some things that come to mind that I would do. And this may seem counterintuitive, but if I had age diversity in my direct team, I would actually plan to have some conversations about the assumptions we make and the stereotypes about each group. And I would do that not in a we have a problem here kind of way. I would do it in a proactive and fun kind of way, right? I would take a part of a regular staff meeting and I would introduce the topic in some way, maybe a mix and match game, like which stereotypes match to which group, or maybe I would take a project that's coming up and talk about it from the perspective of, who our end receiver is and what do we think based on age group someone would have. But then I would turn that into a conversation about, wow, what are the pluses of the fact that we have people from different age groups right here on our team? And then I would say, and sometimes that presents a problem. So, what are some of the problems? And then together, we're just talking about it and coming up with some ways that we want to engage with one another. So, I would make it a conscious, like I'd put it on the conscious radar of people on my team. Now, if we're talking about company wide, I'd want to do the same thing, but right, it wouldn't be uh, as easy or as intimate as if it is an intact work team. The other thing that comes to mind for me is that if I were the leader of a team, department, or division, I know there's certain projects or projects, certain things that we need to do. And so when I am assigning people to resolve this problem or a group of people to come up with things for us to consider in terms of completing a business goal, then I would intentionally choose people from different age groups to give them a meaningful shared responsibility to work together to get to the recommendations that will be presented to the board, or get them to work together to create a a, a design of some project related to our business focus. Because most of the stories we make up are made up because we don't have any real lived experience with people from that group or from the different groups. So all we are navigating from, we're working from the stories that we know, that we've heard consciously or subconsciously. And that's why we call it unconscious bias, right? So, those are some of the things that come to mind in terms of minimizing the separation and building some experiences where we no longer ignore people who are different from us or judge them without knowing them or without considering the value they bring. Let's look at number three. Number three, and if you have a specific sticky situation, put it in the chat and put it in the comments, and I'll see if I can bring it into the conversation as well. So, number three, what should we do when we have a known offender? A known offender is in quotation marks. What do we do when we have a known offender who is not disciplined or fired, even after several employees have filed complaints? This too is not a new challenge, but it is still a very big challenge when you have someone, when you in your organization, you've provided training about inclusion, you have gone really public with what your standards are, you have done meetings and presentations about how committed your association or organization is to valuing diversity and achieving inclusion and equity and belonging. And then people know that this one person, this, one manager or one key employee has done and said things on a regular basis that are in violation of those standards. And everybody, they're looking around and they're talking to each other like, why isn't this person been fired? Or why hasn't this person been demoted? Or why hasn't this person, been excluded in some way? And I do want to first say, having been a chief HR officer at one point in my career, that there are times when people are disciplined. They may be under performance plans. They may be being required to have one-on-one coaching behind the scenes. And so we can't always know whether someone has receive discipline or feedback, or that there are things happening. I can even think of one situation where there was a leader who was demoted by work level, but it wasn't evident that that was happening as a result of how they were showing up under the umbrella of inclusion, because around the same time there was a reorg. So the fact that there were two departments or two areas that no longer reported to this person, it just looked like it was a reorg, which it was. And a big part of that was related to how this person had been in violation of diversity related guidelines and expectations. But of course, that was not announced publicly. And so you have to be careful if you assume that nothing has happened. But the fact that they are still active, is actively engaged or visible, it's probably a reflection of one of three things, or all three. Number one, they get great results. I've had people say to me with clients, oh, yeah, he's a problem, but he's a really good nurse. Or, yeah, she's a little brusque and people bristle, and, but she meets her numbers every quarter, right? We excuse inappropriate behavior sometimes because the person is getting business related or operations related results. I am not saying that that is appropriate. I'm just saying that's one of the three reasons that I hear from clients that this happens. So the second is that they actually are related to, in some way, an executive level leader or the owner of the company. And while, again, I don't think that's appropriate, I don't co-sign on it. If I have a voice, I'm able to speak against that. But sometimes that is true. They're the son-in-law of the owner, or they are the wife of a cousin, or they are the high school friend of the chairperson of the board, right? And so none of those make it okay. But sometimes when you know that, it also tells you a story about the culture you're working in and the leaders at the top level of the organization. That is helpful to know, because you don't want to be in denial. You don't want to be in denial, and you don't want to blame the wrong people for the fact that this person is still employed. And the third thing that comes up a lot more than I would have expected is that key leaders agree that this person should be gone, but they don't they are not comfortable with hard conversations or with confrontation, or the culture of the organization is very, very non-confrontational. And so usually when that happens, there are people who are trying to convince this person to leave, or, they're removing some resources thinking, oh, well, now this person will leave. But the person is like really comfortable and they think they're doing a good job, and nobody has given them any hassle. And so they keep doing what they've been doing. So if you find yourself in this situation, then if you are if you are a person who's non-confrontational, but you have authority here, then you have to suck it up. You have to get some help. and you have to discipline or terminate this person. And there are many ways to work through that. I have coached dozens of leaders through, like, all right, well, you've got to document this, and that you have to have the conversation. The first conversation is not you're fired, unless they did something super blatant. So let's talk about the series of conversations. And in the meantime, let's talk about how you begin to look for their replacement if you really believe this is unsalvageable. But let's say you're not in the direct line of, or the direct chain of command, then you do have a responsibility to involve the right people. There have been at least a half dozen times where I, as the consultant coming in, I was doing focus groups or I was interviewing people, and 4 or 5 people would mention that there was this one person who was a leader who was creating a hostile environment based on some dimension of diversity. And when I went back and I'm talking with senior leaders and I'm asking the question, like, why hasn't something been done about this person? And literally they're looking at me like, what are you talking about? Because no one took it to the people who could take action. So if but it's not in your chain of command or responsibility, then you have a responsibility to let the people know who are responsible or who do have the authority to take some action. Otherwise, you are accepting that this is the way it is, and this person will continue. And keep in mind, there are a lot of situations where someone is creating a hostile environment or someone is being disrespectful, and they are not doing it on purpose. And we never know until we are actually engaged in the conversation, right? We are going to, when we do this work, we assume positive intent until we get more information. And I have seen that happen over and over again, of someone being totally embarrassed and appalled that that's how people were perceiving them, when they thought they were just telling a few jokes, or they were simply sharing, what they knew based on the way they had been raised, and they didn't know that they were offending people in the room. And that's hard to believe, right? When we hear it and we're going like, I can't believe they said that. But give them an opportunity, right, to change and to grow. So get the issue or the challenge in front of the people who actually can make something happen and explain the impact. Now, I do have a comment related to this or any situation like that where feelings are important. They are. And when you are explaining the impact, it has to go beyond feeling, right? And I hesitate when I say that, because if there are 10 women in a department that has about 100 people, if there are 10 women and they feel marginalized, I'm not discounting that. What I'm saying is that, so I should say, don't say that. I should say, in addition to bringing feelings into the conversation, you want to bring in, what's the business impact here? Wow, we've got 10% of this team of 100 people, this department that has 100 people, we've got at least 10 people who feel marginalized or disrespected. So we know their productivity is down, that they could be doing more. You're right, we know that, or we know there must be some communication or conflict resolution needed because they're not talking about it. And that could result, if that is a team, an engineering team, and they're building something for their clients, that could result in mistakes, that could result in injury or death. If it's an association, right, and you have a certain percentage of people who feel like they are constantly ignored or discounted, then that can turn into a business result of them not renewing when their renewal comes up, and you don't understand and know why people are going out the back door. So also, don't only focus on feelings, because sometimes that can get dismissed. Oh, they have hurt feelings, they need to get thicker skin, or I don't care how people feel, I need the business results. So you want feelings plus impact. All right, I'm watching the time. I don't know if I'm going to get through all of these. So I'll be quicker, shorter on these next couple and see if we can get all four in. So I got the question, what do I do if I have people in our group who refuse to use the pronouns they and them because of their Christian beliefs? This is a really hard one because, again, when we are talking about inclusion, we are talking about everyone being included. And sometimes what happens is people think, oh, well, we have competing groups, right? If I am this and you're that, then why do you get your way and I don't get mine? So, one of the things that we have to remember is that when we are talking about creating an inclusive environment, we are not talking about personal beliefs. We are talking about professional behavior. Now, I'm going to say that again because I'm surprised how many times this totally is missed. When we are talking about creating a culture of inclusion, we are not talking about personal beliefs. We are talking about professional behavior. So if if any of us have beliefs for whatever reasons, our religion, our culture, our family, our just personal, our personality, but we have beliefs, that's great. But beliefs are invisible, right, until you turn them into action. I cannot tell you what to believe or not believe. What I can tell you, if I am a leader in an organization, is that when you are working here, you are representing our organization. And in our organization with 10,000 employees, we could have people who believe 10,000 different things. But where we come together is in the standards that we set about what is professional and how do we demonstrate respect in a professional environment and in a professional way. So I'm constantly reminding clients that even as you are developing the expected actions that people will take, make sure that you are focused on how does this behavior represent our company values, and how is this behavior professional within the context of our industry or the company vision and values that is what we all share together. So that's really the big thing to focus on. um, and if you find yourself in some deeper conversations, then you do have to remember that if you had 50 employees or members who were in a circle and you said, okay, how many of you are Christian? And all 50 of them raised their hand. That within the Christian um, framework, different Christian denominations believe different things. So there's not a monolithic definition of what it means to be Christian or how a Christian behaves. So there is diversity even within that label of I am a Christian. And so that gets even more tricky, which is why we don't make choices based on beliefs of individual employees, including your CEO, right? You want to avoid that. Um, so religion will never override respect in your corporate environment or your professional association. And so that's where you want to land on that. And I have a whole lot more I want to say, but I want to get a couple more in. So the next one is, oh, I love this one. The person sent an email and they wrote, I recently became an officer for my ERG, Employee Resource Group, after 4 years of being an active volunteer. Now my manager said to me, you must need more work if you have time to do this. What do I do to convince my manager that this is important? So there are a couple of things that come to mind. Number one, if you do have a conversation and you have a relationship with your manager where you can remind the manager, oh, I've been involved. I've, chaired this event or I've done this for the last 4 years. Have you ever seen me have a drop in performance? Right. I'm committed to the work that I'm responsible for in this department. And so you can have that kind of conversation. You can assure the manager that you will continue to do everything that is a part of your job. You also, though, want to have a conversation, especially if you are a leader in an ERG. You want to have a conversation with your DEI staff or with your HR leaders or with either even key other leaders in the organization, because there's some gap between the organization saying our ERGs are critical to our success and this individual manager understanding that what you're doing as a manager or as a leader of the ERG is critical to the business's success and that it should be valued. You shouldn't be given extra work beside what you would be doing. And in fact, in a number of organizations, if you become an officer in one of the ERGs, your manager is expected to reduce your workload by about 10% so that you have some bandwidth to be able to serve the ERG and be a leader in that way. So I would have a conversation with the DEI staff about how to engage in this conversation. I would I wouldn't say DEI staff person, go tell my manager they're wrong. I wouldn't do that. But they need to be aware that this conversation is happening and may need to increase communication, not just for you and your manager, but the managers who supervise every ERG leader. Like maybe you pull them together. Oh, guess what? Here are the ERG leaders for 2023. Maybe there's an announcement that goes out or that already went out. But then, in addition to congratulating the new ERG leaders, I'd be pulling in the managers all of them report to remind them of the organization's commitment, to tell them what kinds of things they can do to support the ERG leader's success. And I would remind them that as a leader of an ERG, the person who reports to you is acquiring or enhancing their leadership, communication, conflict resolution skills, and you will only benefit from that. when they are no longer a leader, because they are going to be a stronger contributor to your success. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one because I want to be done in the next 5 minutes, but I think I can get both of these last two examples in. So, this almost, I laughed it just then, but when I have come face to face with it in the real world, it almost makes me cry every time. And that's this situation. Someone has been promoted to the DEI leadership role in their organization, but they're not trained in DEI. They were promoted because they were Black. Oh, you're Black, so you must know about diversity. Or they were promoted because they use a wheelchair for mobility, or because they are LGBTQ, they identify as LGBTQ, and they have been vocal about the company needs to do more. That doesn't mean that someone who is in any identity group actually knows about how to change culture. It doesn't mean they have the conflict resolution skills that are required of a DEI professional. It doesn't mean that because they're a woman and maybe have felt like they're in a male dominated environment that they know how to have the conversation related to how employees who are American citizens but are immigrants who immigrated to the US and have an accent doesn't mean because they have been faced with gender inequality that they know how to deal with accent and language. So I really don't know what to say about this except that if this is you, or if this is what's happened in your organization, it's really critical that you provide training and you require coaching from someone who is a DEI professional for this person if you want them to be an effective leader. Last example or question, and this one requires 30 minutes all by itself, but I'm going to give it a try. In my association, people live all over the globe, but we keep talking about diversity from a US perspective and mainly just about either the discrimination that people experience based on race or their LGBTQ status. How can I get people to acknowledge and address the problems that others face? All right, so this is going to be a lightning round. Number one, be the change, be the model of talking about other dimensions of diversity. You can share articles as broadly as possible that feature more than just race or sexual orientation. You can be the one who signs up to speak or present at your local chapter, your state event, or the national and international events that your association has. And if you are invited to speak, then of course you want to model using examples that are broader than race and sexual orientation or gender identity. Not eliminating those because those are important, but you can model that there is more to the conversation. You can also integrate examples of someone using a wheelchair or someone who is blind in images that you use or in examples that you give in team meetings. So you can be an example that brings it up. And when you do, others will as well. But there is one thing in this question that does concern me, and I want to speak to that briefly. So at the end, the person who wrote this said, "How can I get people to acknowledge and address the problems that others face?" And so that gives me an opportunity to say, remember, when we are building an inclusive culture, it is not just about fixing problems, because so many people think We should only talk about diversity if there's a problem. Oh, we have to go to diversity training. Oh, who screwed up and did something wrong? What, I didn't hear about the lawsuit. What happened? So we do also, while we expand the stakeholders, we want to also expand our habit of thinking we only talk about diversity when there's a problem. A truly inclusive environment represents a, an environment where we notice diversity, we accept diversity, we value diversity, and we use the diversity that exists in order to achieve our common goal. And so, in that regard, we also want to be talking about how the diversity of the different groups contributes to our business success. If you are navigating real life challenges, I'll give you a little insider information. When I am faced with a scenario, what I have in my head is an acronym. Ooh, that's a tough one. How can I care? Really, literally, that's what goes on in my head. How can I care? How can I care? So it's an acronym for curiosity, alignment, respect, and equity. Curiosity, alignment, respect, and equity. And what do I mean by that? When someone is demonstrating an issue or a problem, I go, okay, I need to be curious. I don't want to jump to conclusions. I want to be curious. What's really going on? Why do you perceive this as a problem? Because I may perceive it as a problem from a very different place, but you're bringing it to my attention. So I want to be curious about why you perceive it as a problem, curious about what you think should be done, but I'm starting with curiosity. Alignment, the A in care. Alignment, another word for that could be integrity. So, how do I respond to this situation in alignment with our culture, our industry, and the commitment that we have made public about inclusion? So, whatever I recommend as next steps, is it in alignment with who we say we are or who we are trying to become? Curiosity, alignment. The R is respect. So, whatever the solution is, or whatever the next steps are, how how am I demonstrating respect, or how am I coaching you to demonstrate respect? CAR, and the E is equity, not equality, not enforcement, but equity. Is the solution that I am recommending here, or the next steps that I am recommending here, does it create or maintain an equitable environment or an equitable system? Will this transfer to others who might be in this situation in this organization? So it's a little something you can keep in mind when you have your own sticky situation that comes up, that's a real life situation, and you want to navigate it in alignment with your commitment to inclusion. So, of course, as you already know, to do all of that and to respond consistently and in a healthy and professional way, yeah, it requires us to listen well. It requires us to have empathy. It requires us to have knowledge about what's fair, what's legal, what's not legal, what's possible, what's not possible, and flexibility, because there's no cookie cutter response to what shows up in the real world. You've got to have the skills to create options, and you want to do that from as objective and non-judgmental place as possible. I hope this helps you think about how you might navigate some really difficult situations that come up in your organization. And if there are any times when you feel stuck, please reach out to us at Intentional Inclusion just by emailing staff@tracybrown.com or going to the website and posting something there. You can find me on LinkedIn and on Facebook, but the fastest way is emailing staff@tracybrown.com. That's what I've got for you. There were about 20 situations that we were choosing from, and I thought it would be a piece of cake to do 6 or 7, but it took every minute that we had. Please continue to check out the sessions from the Achieving Inclusion Summit. Maybe you missed yesterday's, or maybe you missed this morning. All of them have been really impactful, and I know I'm going to be going back and listening to some of them again. But for now, that's it for Tracy's Tips.